Everyone tells you to do more MKSAP, more questions, more reading, more practice. But if more MKSAP were the answer, the ABIM failure rate wouldn't have nearly doubled in 5 years. The problem isn't MKSAP. Instead, it's that every time people get questions wrong, they assume that it's because they didn't know something. So study more, and their score stays the same. I coach physicians through the ABIM and subspecialty boards, and what I keep seeing is doctors who keep getting things wrong that they know. So when we go through their missed questions together, at least half of the time, the knowledge was there, but something else went wrong. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what that thing is, and when you learn it, you're going to get more questions right in less time, and your chances of passing your boards and moving on with your life go way up. So let me show you a common problem that holds people back on the ABIM. I'm going to read you a question and a passage, the kind that you might see in MKSAP, and I'm going to make a mistake, and so see if you can catch it. So this is something you might see in the MKSAP board basics section. You might say something like, coronary artery disease remains the leading cause of death worldwide. In patients with established coronary artery disease, silent myocardial ischemia, defined as objective evidence of ischemia in the absence of symptoms, has been identified in up to 25% of post-MI patients. All right, so you've just read that. Now let's go to the vignette. A 58-year-old woman presents with routine wellness evaluation. As part of a comprehensive screening package, a coronary artery ultrasound is performed and reveals stenosis of approximately 50%. She reports no symptoms, no dizziness, no visual changes, no focal weakness, or medical history, blah, 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 blah. Now, did you catch my mistake? Go back and read it again. It actually said carotid for the ultrasound, not coronary. However, when I read it out loud, I said coronary, which if you were like the internal medicine attending that I was reading this question with, he did the exact same thing. He had just been reading about coronary artery disease, and then he saw a question that was talking about carotid ultrasounds, and he just substituted one thing for the other because it seemed pretty similar. This phenomenon is called anchoring. His brain was anchored on the coronary artery disease that he had just read from the passage. However, it also happens for, people where it's like, I just saw a patient like this, or I had another question where there was something similar and it was still on your mind. And so we substitute the thing that is in front of us with the thing that we were thinking about. And as a consequence, even though he knew exactly what it is that you should do for carotid stenosis, he saw coronary disease and then, he was off to the races. The same thing happens with drug names. I was working with someone for the ABIM and they saw diltiazem, but they read it as diazepam. These are totally different drugs, but the letters look similar enough that their brain filled in the rest and they completely missed that the person was on a calcium channel blocker. The issue is that the more that you study, the stronger that this gets. The more that we just learned about coronary artery disease, now everything is going to look more like coronary artery disease, right? Like it's like we're carrying a hammer and then everything else becomes a nail. Or if we just answered 3 heart failure questions, the next question might seem a little bit similar, and so our brain jumps to heart failure even before we finish reading it. Now in fairness, this happens in general, right? This is a certain part of our brain that goes on autopilot. We'll scan questions instead of reading them because we're worried about time, right? This happens in all exam scenarios. However, the way that MKSAP is set up, where you read a passage right before you answer questions, oftentimes makes this worse. Especially under pressure, we don't read what's actually there. We read what we expect to see. What I showed you is just one example of this, but it's part of something much bigger. When I go through missed questions with physicians that I coach, at least half of the time, the knowledge was actually there. In other words, they knew the answer. However, something else went wrong. Anchoring is just one of those reasons, but there are others. If you want to pass your test as quickly as possible, be sure to like and hit subscribe and hit notifications as well, so that you can see all of our other videos about board studying and the ABIM. But the point is that there are lots of reasons that you can miss a question, and the fix is different for each one. Like we were saying, when you hold a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And the issue is that the way that MKSAP is set up, it's literally handing you a hammer. It sets up everything to look like a knowledge problem, because you'll read something and then you answer questions, and then if you get it wrong, it's like, oh, okay, well, I just didn't know enough knowledge. And so the issue is that a lot of people then think, oh, okay, well, because some of the questions I'm getting wrong are because of knowledge, all of the questions must be because I don't have enough knowledge. And so they end up reading more. But if the real reason that you missed a question is that you were anchored on something that you just read, or you scanned it because of autopilot, or the answer choices pulled you off track, no amount of reading is going to fix that, right? The issue is that you don't want to treat every single wrong answer the same way, and that's why your score isn't moving. Think about it. If 50% of the questions that you get wrong have nothing to do with knowledge, which again, for the vast majority of people, that's true, especially if you're an attending physician and you are seeing patients all the time. If you could just get a fraction of those questions correct, right, the ones that you had the knowledge for, but you messed up for some other reason, that is oftentimes the difference between failing and passing. It's not necessarily about more studying, and it's certainly not doing more of the MKSAP like board basics or things like that. It's literally just getting credit for what it is that you already know. And I know what's at stake, because oftentimes the people that work with us, they haven't yet passed their boards, and so every time that someone asks them how their studying is going, they feel it. When their employer says, hey, you need to be board certified or at least board eligible, and like their eligibility window is shortening, right? It's not just an exam, it's literally about their job, their mortgage, their sense of self. And so the faster that you figure out what's actually going wrong, the faster that you can pass and move on with your life. And remember, oftentimes you're not missing questions because you didn't study enough. I mean, yes, if you are getting low scores and it doesn't feel good when you're doing questions, then yes, naturally you're not going to study as much. However, the root cause isn't that you're not studying enough. The root cause is that you're missing questions because you're treating every wrong answer like it is a knowledge problem. And again, at least half of them are not. If you want to get there even faster, be sure to sign up for a free consultation with our team, where we'll show you exactly what it is that's holding you back, and if it makes sense to work together, how you can pass your test even when you're really busy so that you can move on with your life as quickly as possible. So how do we figure out what's actually going on so that we can get more questions correct in less time so we can move on with our lives? One of the biggest issues with the ABIM is that there's no real accurate test that is going to tell you whether you're going to pass or not. It's nothing like what you had for step 1 or step 2, where there's lots of practice NBMEs and things like that will literally give you a predicted percentage likelihood of passing. For the ABIM, there's nothing. And so most people just end up working through MKSAP. They'll go through system by system or maybe chapter by chapter, and they just hope. They just hope that by spending more time studying, by either reading more of the board basics or by doing more MKSAP questions or doing more flashcards or whatever, that eventually their score will improve. This is an issue because the first real true feedback that they're getting about their predicted likelihood of passing is actually their exam result itself that told them whether they passed or not. And so if you have been studying for a year and you don't know whether you're studying for a year is working, by the end, it's like, oh, okay, well, like, what do you do? Like, if there's something wrong, how would you know what it is that you were doing wrong, and how would you know how to fix it? And so as a consequence, it makes sense why people bounce from system to system, right? Because there's so much stuff. And so the instinct is that, okay, well, there's so much information that I need to cover, and so I need to cover it as quickly as I possibly can. And without a lot of real-time feedback of how effective your studying is, then what people do is they just kind of go off of their gut. And there's that one cardiology question that stuck with them that was really tough. It's like, oh yeah, I gotta do cardiology. And they kind of add that to their mental checklist. And then they remember, oh yeah, I didn't do great on neuro in medical school or in residency. So they're like, okay, well, I guess I gotta add neuro to that too. So the issue is that people keep going back to the things that feel like weaknesses instead of actually figuring out what their actual weaknesses are and which ones are likely to raise their score the fastest. And so by the end of the month, they've touched a lot of material and then they couldn't pass a focus quiz on any of it. And here's the killer that causes most of the failures for the ABIM that we see. What happens next is that people's scores end up being disappointing. Like when they do take maybe a larger mixed block of say MKSAP questions, or when they get that ABIM failure, their scores are hugely disappointing. The issue is that when you're putting in a lot of work and the numbers aren't moving, studying starts to feel pointless. And so as a consequence, because it's pointless and it's painful and it's like, I'm not really seeing any results, the natural thing is that people are going to start avoiding studying. And then we start to make excuses. It's like, oh, I just don't have enough time. Oh yeah, no, work has been really busy. It is true. Like all attendings that I work with, all of them are busy, right? It's super, super busy. But to be honest, as soon as those people start getting 80% every single time that they study something and they can see their scores literally move up within like a day or two, do you think that they continue to say like, oh, I don't have enough time? Like, of course not. They are super excited to study because every single time they're studying, they're seeing results and they're getting that hope. Even though they have literally the same number of hours in a day, they are studying much more efficiently because they can see that what they're doing is actually working. So ultimately the issue is not discipline. Instead, it's that people's approach is giving them bad results, and those bad results are killing their motivation. And remember, anyone would avoid something that makes them feel like they're failing, and so they end up studying less, and then their scores will get even worse. And then they feel guilty because they're like, oh, well, I'm not studying that hard. I guess maybe it does make sense that I'm not, scoring that well. And they start to think like, well, maybe there's something wrong with me, and then they're like, oh God, well, I guess I'm just lazy. I guess I'm not smart enough. And then this whole spiral happens. This is why most people fail the ABIM. So what's the solution to this? If you want to get higher scores in less time, here's what I tell physicians that I work with. First, stop doing MKSAP on random. Right? Instead, choose one subtopic, not the whole system, but literally just one subtopic. For example, coronary artery disease is a good example, right? Like don't do all of cardiology, just do one subtopic like coronary artery disease. Then read the board basics section for that subtopic. Then you'll make flashcards so that whatever you learn today is still going to be in your head on exam day, right? Not gone in 3 weeks, which it normally is. And this part is critical because, again, most physicians that are, attendings or residents or fellows that are studying for their ABIM, they're really busy. And so you can't take the same approach that you did for like step 1 and step 2 and expect that you're going to be able to study full time for the exam, right? No, you have a lot of days that you're studying, but not a lot of hours in the day that you can study. And so you have to make sure that everything that you're learning, you are never going to forget it. And so for that, we recommend highly using spaced repetition and particularly Anki. So once you've done that, then do 10 MKSAP questions on that subtopic. And the question is can you get 80%? Because if you can, it means your knowledge is solid and your question skills are working too. You've proved in one day that your studying is working. Great. If you've done that, move on. If you cannot get 80% in a day, you found that you have a problem. You don't have to wait until your practice exam, which doesn't exist, or your exam day, which might be in a year from now. You can figure out literally today if you have a problem. For example, if you're not getting 80% and there's a lot of questions you got wrong because of a knowledge issue, then yeah, it's probably because you just didn't learn enough of the material. And if you had the knowledge and you're getting it wrong for something else, like because you anchored or because your mind just kind of went on autopilot, then you know that you have to work on your interpretation skills. Maybe you have to slow down. Maybe you need to read it more carefully, right? Maybe you need to trust your instincts more. Each problem needs a different fix, and focusing on one subtopic lets you see which one that is, because you're kind of taking knowledge off the table in many ways, right? Like it doesn't take that long to learn everything that you need to know about coronary artery disease. And so once you know that, then you can kind of take that off the table as one of the potential problems. As a bonus, if you want to pass your test really quickly, this is also the fastest way to learn, because once you study one subtopic, all the related ideas are going to build on each other for any of the related subtopics, right? Like once I learned coronary artery disease, it's so much easier to learn heart failure. Once I've learned about heart failure, now learning about tamponade or learning about, I don't know, like aortic stenosis becomes that much faster. Now compare that to what most people do, which is like they're bouncing between systems where nothing really connects. They're like, oh, I don't know, today I guess is going to be like a cardiology day, or I don't know, maybe I'm going to learn neuro today. And most people are not making flashcards or doing flashcards, or at least they're not doing it very effectively. And so everything that they're learning, they end up having to forget and then relearn again later. And the other reason why this will help you to get higher scores in less time and move on with your life is that it will fix the motivation and I don't have enough time problem. Because when you sit down and you get 80% on a subtopic, you will know that it is working. It's not guessing anymore, right? When you stack those, you're like, oh, I got 80% on coronary artery disease, and then heart failure, and then arrhythmias. Your score will go up. And because you have made good flashcards and you're doing those flashcards, it will stay up. Right? Like you don't have to go back and have that pain of having to relearn something that you just did like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. I like to play games where if I wait, I win. Meaning that as long as I just keep doing this thing with enough consistency and with enough intensity, then it may not be tomorrow, it may not be next week, it may not be next month, but I will win whatever that game is that I am playing. The other thing is that the overwhelm tends to go away because you can see progress, right? So all the guilt that people feel of like, oh, I'm not getting enough done, it just goes away because you're gonna see real results. And you'll also see that you weren't lazy. It was that your approach wasn't giving you good results, and the bad results were the things that made you want to quit. So remember, one subtopic, read it first, make cards on the entire section, and then do 10 questions and see can you hit 80%. That will tell you more in one day than literally months or years of random MKSAP questions and just hoping and praying that your score goes up. Remember, if you failed the ABIM, it doesn't mean that you're a bad doctor. It doesn't even mean that you're a bad test taker. What it means is that you need the right approach. If you want to understand more about the growing epidemic of ABIM test takers who are failing their exam, be sure to check out this video where I go through the reasons why 1 in 7 doctors are failing the ABIM.